Without any further ado from me, Zane or Jeremy, the show is all yours.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen, presentation. Yeah, let's go. All right. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Awesome.
Perfect.
All right, great. Okay, so I really appreciate y'all joining Jeremy and myself to go over the TSDS Childline data submission roles and responsibilities. As Derek said, I'm Zane, and then we have Jeremy. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Jeremy McKay. I've been working with Zane with the agency. Happy to join since fall of this year, and so just learning everything I can from the master of child find here in Dr. Webinar.
Awesome. All right. So just general overview. In terms of introduction, like Jeremy said, we work on the Office of Special Populations and Monitoring, the data team. I'm the data manager. Jeremy is a data analyst and a SAS programmer. And one of our responsibilities on this team is the TSDS Child Find collection, which includes, of course, SPP 11 and 12. So we handle that throughout the school year in terms of putting out guidance, answering Tim's questions, and then also in putting out TAAs, which one should be coming out, I believe next Thursday, on just reminding districts and ESCs of the submission deadline to complete your child find submission. And then we also process that data, provide it over to the review and support department, and they do provide clarifications, work with the LEAs, and then we take that data and continue processing it. So from there, we're going to kind of go over the general TSDS Child Find system, an overview. Jeremy's going to take over and we have a diagram. He's going to kind of walk you through that diagram. Provides a high level perspective on the child find system, but not just the system itself. It helps you understand what are some of the dependencies, what are some of the impacts of this system. What does the data, not just the data in and of itself, but how does that data kind of map or bleed through to all of these other activities that we have, whether they're at the state or whether they're federally required. And then we're going to kind of touch on the submission timeline. And again, this is related to to the administrator address letter that should be going out next Thursday, so you can look for that. And then I'm going to take over and I'll talk about the child find data responsibilities. And so some of these responsibilities mostly relate to at the LEA or the district level, especially because the child find collection requires collaboration between not just program area staff, but PEMS and TSDS data stewards who also work at the district. And so a lot of the responsibilities that we're going to outline are based on trainings that TSDS envisions for their system, and which we collaborate with them. And so, and kind of what some of our vision for how the collaboration works. And so that kind of works not only at the agency level, but then it goes down to the ESC and then at the local level. And then provide a slide, talk about a few resources. This presentation will be posted online. And so you'll be able to go, and we have hyperlinked those resources so you can click on those as well. All right, Jeremy, why don't you take it away?
Awesome. Thank you very much, Zane. So on the screen, you see this sort of left to right process diagram, and you may have seen it before in another presentation regarding just the overall child find process, but kind of want to take a look at it from a little different vantage point today, really part of the reason for this presentation and this webinar today comes from just an observance and listening to some of the concerns that bubble up, whether it be in face-to-face discussions, or it's in Tim's tickets or emails that come through, whatever the case may be. Sometimes the questions that we receive revolve around, or some of the friction that may come up revolves around just the who does what aspect of the different elements that go into the Child Find collection. And so that's kind of what we want to take a run at that today, just to hopefully we can help provide an understanding, at least from the agency end, of where those responsibilities lie. And so we know that really the Child Find process begins over there on the left. It's with our kiddos, and that's the responsibility that we have, to go to find those kids, to make sure that we're identifying them properly, that we are evaluating when appropriate, that we're making eligibility determinations, that we're bringing them into the fold in the way that we need to. And we know that looks different in different communities and different school areas. And yet those overarching requirements are the same. And so we know the bulk of this, it's kind of the small part of the diagram, but we know that the bulk of the work is happening out there in your individual LEAs and within your individual processes that you've developed within the framework of your school. But in the process of receiving those referrals, finding those kids, conducting the initial evaluations, making those determinations, meeting with parents, all of the things that you do, the data entry, and all of that, we know that it ultimately from your school district makes its way into the TSDS Child Find collection. And so that's where all that data gets aggregated. It gets analyzed. There are calculations that are applied. Zane's done a lot of great work working with the folks at TSDS as far as building out the machine, so to speak, that takes in the data that you provide, and then makes calculations based on things like parent consent dates, evaluation timelines, your individual school calendar, possibly the individual track that a student might be on, making all of those mathematical calculations to determine whether or not that child's initial evaluation is proceeded according to timeline. And so once that's done, we know that that feeds out into our determinations of compliance or non-compliance in your district. We know that those are, that's a high bar. It's 100% compliance target. And so, but we do have the opportunity when we make those determinations, there's always the opportunity for you and your LEA to go through the process of possibly clarifying some data if there might be some data quality, data integrity issues that might be clouding that issue somewhat. You have an opportunity to clarify that, working with those folks that you're interfacing with in the Division of Review and Support. You'll see in the middle there that SPP APR submission is tied to pre-clarification data. That's a federal requirement. And so we do need to provide to the Department of Education our pre-clarification numbers, which is simply a numerator and denominator. It's the number of kids that had parental consent for evaluation in relation to those that had their evaluations completed on time. And so that's submitted to the feds. Here at the state level, we do then make our compliance determinations based on the post-clarification data. So if you've been able to participate in clarifications and clear some things up, and in your district, you've been able to come to 100% compliance, all Child Find students evaluated on time, then you receive that post-clarification indication of compliant, which is always where we want to be. And so if not, then a non-compliant determination, as you know, just put us in a place where you're working on that corrective action plan and working with monitoring and supervision, developing those processes to make improvements, always in that continuous improvement mindset, which is where we all want to be. And so going forward from there, now those compliance elements then feed into the federally required elements, which are measured at a little different bar, at 95% or above. But then that goes into our results-driven accountability system at the state level. And so those determinations are made. We look at those performance levels. A determination level is assigned. Some of those indicators we're taking a look at significant disproportionality. And so that then feeds into the monitoring system, and whether districts are on track for their regularly scheduled cyclical monitoring or might be identified for some targeted monitoring based on those inputs. And all along the way, from left to right, there's an individual somewhere in your district, and there's also some folks that provide some support, not only at the state level, but in your education service centers in your region, where some of that goes back and forth. But we know that sometimes there is a little bit of there's a level of coordination that needs to take place as far as who is doing data entry, perhaps, who's submitting data, who is promoting data, who completes the data. Oftentimes there's a little bit of the ball's in the air between possibly special education program staff and those district level PEAMS coordination staff. And they have different roles, not only in your district, but within the TSDS system. And Zane will talk about those. But I know where the rubber hits the road a lot of times is when we're coming to summertime and it's time to complete and finally get those submissions in. We've got some folks who may not be at work anymore, right? And so, especially in some of our smaller districts where folks wear a lot of hats. And so sometimes there can be some back and forth as far as who should take care of each individual piece. And so that's just going to require a high level of really proactive thinking and coordination and thinking about timelines throughout the year, being proactive about promotion and completion as we go throughout the year. Zane, if you want to advance to that submission timeline. So this is for the current year. We're looking at, again, all of our students who have that special education eligibility determination date. And in TSDS terms, that's data element 1716. That falls between July 1st of 2022 and the summer date approaching of June 30th, 2023. And so back on August 1st, TSDS opened up, ready for you guys to load data into that eData module. September 12th, Child Find opened for you all to begin promoting your data. And we always plug here for encouraging everyone to work on that, like I said, proactively, stay ahead of it, stay on top of it, rather than coming to the end, so that you can get that feedback in your system as we go, so that you know if there are some data issues that you might need to resolve or rectify, that you're able to work on those as you go. Sometimes there are little unexpected tricky things that might come out of the intersection between your student information system that your district uses, possibly your third-party systems where you're tracking things like evaluation and ARDs and IEPs, and ultimately the TSDS and PIM system. May 15th, which is coming up, we will be able to start completing your Child Find data. And so you'll be wanting to take a look at that soon. And then the deadline in the summer will be July 27th, 2023. And Zane, you can chime in here, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that is that last business Thursday of the month of July is typically how that rule applies. And so then our data will be available to customers on August 10th as we close out the cycle.
And that August 10th, that's when the data is available in terms of customers. That's internally at the agency. That's when we are able to access the data, child find data, and then we start processing it to identify which districts have less than 100% compliance. And once we identify those districts, then we provide that information over to the review and support department, and then they reach out to engage with clarifications process. Right. All right. Okay, so this slide, I'm going to go over kind of the child find, the roles and responsibilities. The roles being these key stakeholders we have at the LEA. We have special education director, staff. We have the TEA, LEA data steward, PEMS clerk, whoever's responsible for entering that data. And then at the ESC level, we have the TSDS Child Find Champion. This is a person that has received training about the child find collection from TSDS. They actually receive a series of trainings. They take a test, pass a test, and they have a basic level of knowledge about the child find collection. And then also at the ESCs, there's the TSDS technical champion. This individual is really important for that technical aspect of submitting data to TSDS. And then, of course, at the agency here, we have the data team that includes myself and Jeremy. We have the review and support team, and that's a different division within our office, and they handle all of the monitoring, the review and the monitoring of school districts in regard to special education. Then in TSDS, we have subject matter experts. So there's a child find subject matter expert that we often work with, collaborate and consult with. And then we have those experts work in terms of when an LEA has a question or issue, and they contact their ESC, and then that ESC can then submit a TIMS ticket. And so that TIMS ticket kind of brings together all of this, the data team, the subject matter expert, even policy team, or the program and policy team at the agency to help address those tickets. And so that's kind of a listing of these key stakeholders. Now I'm kind of narrow in and really focus on, at the LEA level, we're going to focus on both the special education director, our staff, our designee, and then the TEA LEA data steward, or whoever would be responsible at your district for submitting TSDS data or PEMS data. And so one thing to keep in mind, if you look at this swim diagram, is that the bulk of responsibility for the child find collection, for the TSDS child find collection, in terms of submitting data, completing that submission, evaluating kids for which the data were submitted, it really boils down to the special education director or staff. And that's really important to highlight, because the special education program area they are the experts on the evaluative process, the different timelines, and they also are feel the blunt of responsibility if there is noncompliance. They are the ones who become the point of contact when a corrective action is in place. And these corrective actions, of course, that's not that at the state's really discretion. That comes from the federal government, that if there is noncompliance identified, then that noncompliance has to be corrected in no more than a year from the date that the LEA receives written notification of that noncompliance. And so because the bulk of that, the impact of the child find collection relies on the special education staff, it's very important that their role is, and responsibility is the primary driver of the TSDS child find collection. And that One part of that is information that's already known, which is why they're in this position in the first place. But the other part is, along with the TSDS child find collection, it's very important that having to learn this new system, which is the different data elements for the child find collection. They're being very familiar with their definitions. And one example of that is the parental consent. Currently, the parental consent data element, which is that date. The parental consent date is the first instructional date after the district received parental consent. And so being familiar with that date. Of course, that's actually going to end up changing as a previous presentation on the different changes that have occurred. But currently right now, that date is that first instructional day after the LEA receives consent. And so it's very important that every part of the special education program at the LEA is familiar, not just with the collection in of itself or the evaluative process, but also with the different data elements, their definitions, because the different definitions, if somebody interprets that definition differently and inputs a different date, that can affect the compliance, and that compliance can then result in a corrective action. And so it's really important that if we start at the beginning, the evaluative process, whether it's obtaining the parental consent, completing that initial evaluation, completing the eligibility determination, determining if the child's and then at that R, whether or not the child's going to receive special education services. All that occurs, of course, at the special education program level at the LEA. Then it is also their responsibility to enter that data for the child. For example, the parental consent date, the date that the initial evaluation was completed, the date of the eligibility determination. What's the code? Was a student considered eligible and going to receive special education or not? How many absences did the student have during that time frame? All of that data has to be entered into either the student information system that the district has or some type of third-party SPED application that the district has. And so that all is the responsibility of the special education program, really boiling down to the special education director. Of course, at the local level, this is a district, a superintendent or can assign these tasks to different people. But generally the vision, as I mentioned before, from TSDS and from the more program area and the data team at the agency is that this is all ties back to the special education director, because they are ultimately responsible for the consequences if data are entered incorrectly or whatnot. But then that coordination really kind of transfers over to TEA LEA data steward, that PEIMS clerk, or the person responsible in the district responsible for submitting the TSDS data to the agency. And so what this individual will do is the SPED program really needs to coordinate with the LEA data steward, so that data steward can extract that child find data from that SIS or that student information system or third-party application. And then once they extract the data, they're going to load that data into the Operation Data Store or the ODS for TSDS. And that really gets the data ready to then promote and validate and whatnot. And so that LEA data steward, those two aspects of their role in this process are very important. That they're extracting that data, but they're also loading that data. But the coordination of that is also important. So, for example, although the districts can start completing their child find submission on May 15th, just a couple days away, the collection period for SBP 11 and 12 goes from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. So in that process, if a district was to complete their submission or was to extract that child find data and load it into the ODS, but then they have a child comes and they complete that initial evaluation and they complete that eligibility determination before that June 30th deadline. It's very important that the LEA, the special education program, and the data steward coordinate together, because that data has to be extracted and loaded into the ODS. The most updated data needs to occur. And so once that data is loaded into the ODS for TSDS, then that responsibility really goes back to that SPED director. And this is where they really need to coordinate and work with your TA data steward, and also not just with the LEA TA data steward, but also working with your ESC child find champion and your technical champion to understand the system and become familiar with the system, because in that process, you then need to promote your data and then validate the data to clear any fatal errors or special warnings or warnings, and before actually being able to run and inspect your TSDS reports for both SPP 11 and SPP 12. And those reports are both, you can see those reports at the aggregate report for the entire district, and then you can also see the student level report for each student. And so it's very important that the special education program are the ones that are in the front seat for promoting and validating the data, especially in regard to the different warnings or errors that you might encounter when trying to promote your data in the child find system. For example, last year, one data element that's required, it's federally required, is the delay reason. And this delay reason is anytime there's non-compliance occurs, district is required to submit a delay reason for why that non-compliance may have occurred. That's a federal requirement that has to be completed. In the first year of the child find collection, some of those, this requirement of this data element was a special warning. And they often do that in the first year of a big complex collection, because if not, then the district would not even be able to submit data if that's not cleared out. And so we worked through some of those bugs, and this year that parental consent, that delay reason is now switched. Instead of a special warning, it's now switched to a fatal error. So if there is non-compliance, the district won't be able to complete their submission until they enter a delay reason. Well, the LEA data steward's not going to know, likely not going to know why the timeline was late, why there was non-compliance. That's really going to come down to the special education program. They're going to be the ones that are going to need to coordinate with their school psychologist or diagnostician to understand, well, what happened? Where was there a breakdown in the process? So why was there a delay in evaluating that child? And then once they identify that, they'll need to select a code from the code table and then enter that into their SIS, and then ensure that all gets extracted and loaded up into TSDS so that it can promote. But what we had when we went through our feedback from the first year, we found that a lot of feedback that came from the LEA data steward was about that they were not experts on all of these different programmatic rules in regard to a delay reason, or what happens if there's not compliance, and so they didn't know what to do. And so a lot of the data in the first year of the collection, we had when we investigated it, we found that there were a lot of kids who had non-compliance. There may not have been a delay reason attached to that, and like I said, we're required to report that delay reason. And so as now it's being switched to a fatal error, the district will not be able to, if a SPED program kind of puts that in the lap of the LEA data steward and they get these fatal errors, they're not going to be able to complete this submission with those fatal errors. And so it's really important that you work with your LEA data steward, that once they load that in and they get you get any kind of fatal error, you work with them to understand just that process, but then you also reach out to your ESC to really understand that error. The they try to make the document as clear as possible. It has what data element it is, what student, what's the error, and really look at that business rule. And the business rule really explains what the error is, what is being violated, and what is creating that error in the system. You can also utilize the TWEDS website. And the TWEDS website is the state, the TEA data standards website that has all of those data elements that are included in the child find collection. It also includes the business rules. It includes the submission timeline. It includes the code values. For example, for the delay reason, it has, you can look at the code table to see all of the different delay reasons there. So it's a great resource that's put out by TSDS. And so it really, that responsibility for promoting data, this box, this third box, that's likely there's the most anxiety around that. And so that's why it's really important that once we get over this learning curve, it's to get over this learning curve, utilizing your LEA data steward, but also for support, but also your champions, your child find champion, your technical champion, your TSC technical champion. And then, of course, if you're still not able to identify how to clear that error, or if you think that there is something wrong in the system that's occurring, that's when once you've contacted and reached out to your ESC, that's when you're going to come and really submit a TIMS ticket. And that's when that TIMS ticket kind of goes through some levels of support. It first hits the TSDS folks and a TSDS subject matter expert. And if they're not able to address it, then it comes to us. It comes to the data team for any type of measurement type question, but it also then gets sent over to we sometimes, if we're not able to address like this measurement question, then we will then send that over to the policy and program area for special education, and they will then work with either us, or we will sometimes have to coordinate with the legal department to get a legal advice or guidance. So submitting the TIMS ticket and then actually getting an answer to the TIMS ticket, sometimes it can be very quickly, sometimes it can be a little time consuming. And this kind of goes back to what Jeremy talked about, is that you don't want to wait to the last minute, that last Thursday in July, to submit your data to the child find collection. If you do that and we're not able to, because of, say, a TIMS ticket, and you submit that TIMS ticket a day before the collections due, I can assure you that we're going to be able to provide guidance back, so then you can re-promote and complete that submission. Because if we do have to go get legal, go to the legal department and get there and consult with them, and then work with the policy department, and then work with us, and then respond back to the TIMS ticket, that can take time. And so it's very important that as you promote your data, you need to clear those errors, and you're getting those errors, that you submit a TIMS ticket, that it's early in this process as possible, so that we can on our end be able to investigate that. And so I recommend, as soon as, if there are no children who have been evaluated or coming through the system before that June 30th deadline, then as soon as possible in May or June, really try to promote through data. If you do have a child that's being pushed through up to that, having that eligibility determination completed by that June 30th deadline, then as soon as that's completed, or as soon as possible after that June 30th deadline, want to try to promote your data. Again, you need to coordinate with the LEA data steward, and then also with your ESC to identify if there's any issues that then you might need to submit a TIMS ticket for. But you want to do that if at the latest, the very beginning of July, if possible. And then once those fatal errors have been cleared, and you've checked on any special warnings, and really you need to not just know the definitions to the data elements, but really understand these warnings as well, because all of these warnings are based on business rules that are put in place for a particular reason. And so it's really important to look at those special warnings and try to clear them. And again, you can still contact the your ESC, and then also you would submit a TIMS ticket to the agency for any special warnings that you might have as well. But in terms of actually being able to submit your data, you will not be able to submit it if there's a fatal error. So that's very important that that gets cleared. And so once you promote that data and you clear those warnings, and you inspect your TSDOS reports, that's when you're going to actually be the one to complete that child find submission. You're going to push that button and actually finalize the completion. And as you finalize the completion, you're really attesting to the accuracy and reliability, validity of that data, ensuring that it's correct and up to par. Because the next step after it's completed is then it comes and once it becomes available to the customers, that's when we start processing it. And so that's when, once you complete that submission, you're off the hook until after that data becomes available to the customer, which is in this sense, it's internal at the agency. The data team then processes this data. At this point, it's called pre-clarification data. And we take all of that child find data, parse it out into SPP 11 and 12, and then we aggregate it up from the student level all the way up to the district level. And we do that to identify which districts had 100% compliance, in which case these districts would not be eligible to participate in the clarifications process. But districts that have less than 100% compliance, these districts will be eligible to participate in the clarification process. And so we provide that list over for review and support. And then it all goes back to the special education director at the district, who will then engage in that SPP clarification process, not with us, but with the review and support department, the monitoring department. After they engage in the clarification process, kind of like the diagram that Jeremy went through, there are some different things that can happen. You can clarify all of any non-compliance and end up having 100%. You can partially clarify, or you can try to clarify and not be able to clarify, or you can just not participate if you are eligible. But if you do have, after that clarification period, if the district does have anything less than 100% compliance, then that's when once we get that data back from the review and support department and we process the post clarification data, that's when we're able to identify the LEAs with non-compliance, and then we actually generate letters and send out those letters to the LEAs, and those letters alert the LEA that there was non-compliance and that now this memo 0902 starts to apply. That's a OSEP memo on that. If there's any non-compliance identified, it must be corrected no later than 1 year from the date that the district received that notification from the state agency. And so we generate those letters, and then once those go out, then it goes back to the district. And they have to complete a corrective action. And that's where the districts really work with the review and support department, their specialists, and to be able to clear any of that non-compliance. And there's really, I believe there's 5 things that the district has to do. They have to correct any students that had that non-compliance. They have to do professional development and revise policies and procedures if possible, and really work to provide any with those policies and revising those policies and procedures and correcting the individual non-compliance, and then trying to really improve the system at a system level, not necessarily at an individual level, but a system level. That how can a district ensure that non-compliance, regardless of whether, say, Sarah wins the lottery and leaves tomorrow, then the person that fills her place should be able to pick up exactly where Sarah left off. And that requires really systemic understanding and documentation, policies and procedures, and then really training staff on those as well. And so that all occurs through the review and support department. Again, as you can see on that third swim lane row, at any point in this process, you can reach out to your ESC Child Find Champion or your ESC technical champion to provide support and guidance on this process. But really the overall conclusion from this is that the ultimate responsibility for the child find collection goes back to the special education director and the special education program. And of course, ultimately, it's the decision of the superintendent at the local level, but how the entire child find system is and the trainings have been designed is based on the assumption of these different roles and responsibilities. All right. Now we just kind of go over to the resources section. Of course, as the presentation is posted online in a PDF form, you'll be able to click on these references. These resources to reference. Here, this first resource is the very first TAA that was put out for the child find collection. And this TEA we've included as a resource because it has it has information about requesting information for the different roles to submit data to TSDS. And so this is a very important resource that you want to make sure, save. You can go to the website, and I believe you can actually save the TAA as a PDF, and then make sure that you distribute that throughout your district to everybody who has some stakeholder responsibility in this process. The second resource is a link to the ESC Child Find and Technical Champions for regions 1 through 10, and then a link for ESC 11, regions 11 through 20. And at each of these links, you're going to be able to find all of the different champions for TSDS, but specifically, you'll want to really narrow in on the child find champion and also the technical champion, the TSDS technical champion. Child find champion should be able to help answer questions about program questions, measurement questions about the TSDS child find collection. And then that's really tailored or framed around SPP 11 and 12, around special education. But that TSDS technical champion is really going to be able to provide guidance, more general guidance on the technical aspect of submitting data for the child find collection, submitting data to TSDS. And then the third resource, this TSDS, the web-enabled data standards. This is a very important resource. I pin that resource on my browser, and I probably access this resource 10 to 20 times a day. I'm always going to the TWED's website. I'm searching, looking at business rules, clarifying my understanding of different data elements. So this is a really important resource that you want to be familiar with. And it takes some time to learn the structure and the navigation and adjust your mental schema. But once you're able to do that, then you can really navigate it quickly by identifying up in the right-hand corner the year, and then identifying the collection, and then really going and reviewing the different data elements and code tables and business rules and submission timeline. But this is a very, very important resource. And then, of course, we put out on the TEA website, we have a SPP indicator landing page. And on this page, it has all of the SPP indicators. And from this page, you can go in and you can select the SPP 11 indicator, or you can select the SPP 12 indicator. On each of those pages, there are resources if you scroll down toward the bottom. And some of those resources are duplicated between 11 and 12 because they apply to both 11 and 12. But some of those resources are just specific or unique to that indicator. We also post the presentation slide decks on that, and these links about the child find champions, and then any guidance documents that we put together. And how we kind of work around with developing guidance documents is we identify and analyze and then identify questions and issues that people have had. And then that's what we use to kind of support the justification for saying that we need to develop a new guidance document for this. And so it's really important that in this process, whether you are submitting a TIMS ticket or you're sending us an email, more general email about the child fine collection or whatnot, that you really identify, or if there are issues, you want to raise those issues to us as early as possible, and provide as much information about those issues that you're experiencing to us, because we're able to take that information, and whether some of our previous presentations about all of the changes, those changes wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for you at the LEA level. We really rely on you to communicate to us what issues you're having, what successes you're having, and get that information to us so that we can then work with, whether it's our upper level leadership or we work with the ESCs to really put out guidance or clarification around different parts of the child fine collection. And that's really where this last resource comes in, is the Child Fine Evaluation ARD Support Network. And this is more technical assistance. A lot of the information that is used in this support network, Child Fine Support Network, is also included on the TEA landing page and whatnot. But there's also some policy around this as well. The people who actually run this this resource. And so these are kind of main resources that just to highlight and make you aware of. But I can't stress enough that if there are any issues that you're experiencing, please reach out to us. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Zane, Jeremy, thank you very much for a very informative presentation. I've been working with this stuff, gosh, 7 years now, and every time we dig into this, I learn something new every day. So I really appreciate it. Just one word of reminder for all the participants today. There is no live Q&A. However, several questions have come into the Q&A section. We will, of course, take a look at those questions, and we'll do our very best to provide answers in a timely manner. And then one final reminder for everybody, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to the TEA website within just a few days. So again, thank you very much for attending. Everybody have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all.